know, sometimes it's a pain to find all this stuff. Let's see if we can track it down.
Well, there's the episode 1 video on here.
Episode 1? The other one should be live, like, literally now. Actually, there's a 20-second delay. I lied, so
maybe that's
why. I won't be able to find it until then. I think I just got an email that the Beech Media is going live. Do you want me to send you this link?
There it is, live now. Perfect, found it.
Nice. I just want to make sure that the audio is going, because that's kind of where we struggle.
The audio's definitely working. The video is not on.
Yeah, no, it's believe it or not, it is on.
Is it?
Yeah, does audio, like, we're both good volume? Should be.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Nice. Okay. And let's see if this works. This is going to be nice and lag, but I didn't know how to...
Oh, it's kind of echoing. Sure.
So I think it's because you're playing both. It hears it from yours, and then it's going to play through your mic into my computer, into my mic, and then stream.
Maybe. I don't know. I just muted it, but when I was listening to the audio on the computer, it sounded like it was echoing a little bit.
Yeah, that would make sense. So,
but who knows? Sweet. Well, yeah, there's no good. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, cool.
This is the first time this has actually worked. This is it's about as big a win as I could hope for right now.
Yeah, now people get to sit there, and if anyone watches the video, they get to come and watch me eat chocolate chip cookies on camera.
Yeah, nice. That's huge.
Well, I'll wait till I'm done sharing.
Yeah, sure. No worries. I've the light outside, it seems to be keeping, I don't know, I'm still in the main area. This is where the lights go off, so
yeah,
we'll see how long it lasts, but yeah, I'm going to play around with this. I've got this other camera going too.
Well, I guess we can kind of start talking about what I was going to talk to you about before the podcast.
Yeah.
But I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast today, and a guy named Jack Harron, he's this author who writes these, like, fiction novels for the military. Mm-hmm. But, they're military fiction novels. He writes about, I'm going to butcher this, by the way, because I don't actually read the books. But he essentially is an ex-Navy SEAL. He's got all this military background experience, and he writes these novels based on his own experience. Mm-hmm. And they were talking today about how there's this need for, like this calling for this platform where, it's not a tech industry that's pinned, by regulations with the government, and how what's happening in the U.S. right now is American citizens are essentially walking into this trap for their civilization, which is government regulations and regulating certain things and freedoms for people, like starting with this COVID passport and stuff like that, and how that can turn into something more serious, and all of a sudden you can't travel here because you don't have this, and you can't do this because of this, and you have to obey the law because that's the way it is, right? And that's the way it's been since you were born, and they have more and more control, right? And so it's almost like he calls it an L configuration, and the public is walking in this direction because the tech industry is here, and the government is here with the regulation, and everyone's just walking into this trap, which is regulation through technology and social media, and canceling the First Amendment, which is their freedom of speech and stuff like that. And I think we already don't have that in Canada, right? So that's what got me thinking. It's like I started to think about it because they started to compare what was happening in the U.S. right now with COVID and all the turmoil down there, and then they were saying, oh, well, Canada's like not that much better, right, with what's going on right now. Yeah. And maybe it's just my own, distance from all of this stuff, but I was like, I don't see it that way at all. Like, it doesn't seem that bad here. I mean, I know people are upset about the regulations, especially in Alberta that just got released. Yeah. Right.
It's not as bad as Ontario.
Yeah, it's not like it's causing. Well, I mean, there was the riot in Montreal. I know that. I heard about that. I don't really pay attention because I try not to watch like negative shit. I just keep it out of my space.
Yeah.
But I heard about it, and I don't know any details about it. Do you know anything about that?
Honestly, it's I literally just probably not much more than what you saw. I kind of saw people were looting and vandalizing and stuff, and which is again, it seems so counterintuitive to go after the businesses. I can understand maybe vandalizing and looting a government building, but when you're just messing stuff up on the streets.
Well, do you know what they're saying is happening? Do you know what they're saying is happening in LA right now? Sorry, I'm just putting us out on Facebook.
Nice. Yeah, I should probably do the same.
Oh, that was a really ugly. YouTube needs to update that shit. They're saying it's happening in LA right now is that I guess there's just so much stuff happening. There's so much crime happening there. There's so little police that want to respond or are even capable of responding because they're being defunded and they, one of their heads of government, someone in their government, and it's in the California legislature, is defunding their gang suppression units and stuff now. And gang violence is like one of the most overwhelming problems in Los Angeles, right? So they're talking about how Los Angeles, California as a state is almost like becoming too far to save, but because of what's happening, to the point where people are breaking into fucking stores and they're not, paying for. They're just stealing up to $900 worth of stuff because you won't be prosecuted. They're stealing up to anything under $1,000 worth of property. They just won't bother to even prosecute you. So people are just going in, stealing shit out of people's stores, right? Because their government just fucked them over so bad.
Yeah.
And so you can see how badly things can go when you rely on a government to do everything for you, to make all your decisions, to take away all your responsibility and your, the ability to fucking, take care of yourself, right? Like, as much as I am for all this mask wearing stuff, being polite, and being respectful to people who are, potentially endangered by the disease, or sorry, by COVID, and have those comorbidity factors.
Yeah.
We have to be respectful to that, right? Of course, but we also at some point have to give people the responsibility to take care of themselves, right? It's not up to the entire group to take care of one person or a few people who are susceptible to this sort of thing. And once they're vaccinated, like, why are we still taking these types of measures? The people who are vulnerable to this are vaccinated, right? And so at that point, if you want to wear a mask to protect yourself, wear a mask. But if you don't want to wear a mask because you're not worried about getting the virus, you're not worried about getting sick, then you shouldn't have to wear a mask. That's just the way that it is, right? Yeah. The second you start telling people stuff like that, I think it can become a problem.
Yeah, I think there's, it runs a little bit, because there is the, if I wear a mask and you wear a mask, the rate of possibility of infection is that much lower.
If you've been vaccinated,
mm-hmm. Yeah, but
why does it matter if I don't wear a mask, right?
Yeah, and that's eventually we're probably going to get to that point, but it may take a while. It's like the government's in a little bit too deep to go back on anything at this point. But on another side note, I was actually having a conversation with my sister about this same thing. I was very much on the page. I think it was my own frustrations with everything coming out, just like exactly what you said. Once these people that are in danger get vaccinated, why can't we get back to normal life? And she did bring up the point of there are a lot of cases of people getting COVID, people our age, young people, not dying, but having some long-term effects from it, whether it's a heart condition or something that comes up because of COVID. So even though we're probably, like, especially you and me, we're not going to die, there is a chance that, imagine, like, if that number is like 20% of the people that get COVID end up having some other COVID-related condition that is long-lasting, the long-term effects on the healthcare system become implication too, right? So it kind of, she said that, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of a good point, and maybe we need to get a little bit more vaccinated before we jump on that wagon. But yeah,
I could take this. I want to take this to like the opposite end of the spectrum
okay.
and say, let's look at this from like a. It's just a perspective to look at it from. So you could say, if everything happens for a reason because God or consciousness or whatever is out there making decisions, and coronavirus certainly would be a part of that, or at least maybe it stands out so much because it's not from that; it's a man-made problem, right? Maybe that's why it stands out so much. But let's just say it is because man is ultimately made by consciousness. Even if it is a man-made problem, then it's still a problem from this thing, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of me starts to think about this, and because I actually had a conversation with a client recently, and I'll tell you this story first. I won't mention who it is, but this particular woman had been diagnosed with cancer in her early 20s, and she had cervical and uterine cancer.
Uterine, I think that's right. Yeah.
And she had, I don't know what her family history was or any of the details like that, but she basically found out after she got diagnosed with cancer in those areas that she talked to her cousin and her sister, and they had let her know that when she was a child, she had actually been physically and sexually abused, like terribly and horrifically abused by someone, and had blacked it out because it was so traumatic for her as a kid that she blacked it out. She didn't remember anything, but she started to look up causes and holistic causes for cancer. And when she looked up the holistic, cause for cancer in this area, she started reading these symptoms and stuff. She started to she said she was in shock by, all these different reasons that was lining up with exactly what had happened to her in her childhood. And she started to think about herself and started to love herself and love that part of her body and love those areas of her body. But she was in the hospital, and she refused. She actually refused chemotherapy. She refused radiation. And this is, of course, all her word that I'm going off here. I don't know with this, right? But she's fine now, and she's alive now, and she never had radiation or chemotherapy. But she would wake up every day and she would picture a light inside this area of her where she had cancer, and eventually she came out of it. She was in remission, right? The cancer cells started to die. So they removed the tumors, and then she stayed in the hospital and did this healing thing, and it's where they removed one of her ovaries, and I'm not sure what they did with her uterus. I believe they left it in, but they removed one of her ovaries. The other one was dead, and her uterus was incapable of basically supporting a baby. After she left the hospital, but she was fine, right? She was fine. She didn't do chemo, she didn't do radiation or anything like that, and she was fine. She never went into remission, but she, 5 months after she came out of the hospital, or 8 months after she came out of the hospital, or something like that, she was feeling kind of sick, and she didn't know why. She thought she might be showing signs of the cancer coming back, so she went to the hospital, or she was going to go to the hospital, and right when she thought, oh my God, I'm going into remission, she said she audibly heard a voice in her head. And this is actually a reason that she went, she swears it was God or consciousness or whatever speaking to her, saying, take a pregnancy test. And she was already told by the doctors, you can't be pregnant. You won't be pregnant. It's impossible. You have one ovary and your uterus is incapable. It's dead, and your uterus is incapable of carrying children, right? And so she goes to the hospital, or she takes this pregnancy test, and she actually found the pregnancy test in a box that didn't have a line on it, so she had to go to the store across the street to check what it meant, and she took 4 or 5 more pregnancy tests until they all showed up positive. So she goes to the hospital and says, I'm pregnant. I need you guys to check me. And they're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Like, you're definitely not pregnant. They check her, sure enough, she's 5 months pregnant. And so she got pregnant shortly after she came out of the hospital. And since then, has had 3 kids.
That's wild.
Right? And so, has had 4 kids total. And so, and their kid, who was this miracle baby, right? And under on the birth certificate or somewhere they have written on this medical form for her, act of God, right? That she was able to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And so she had this kid, and this kid I've met him because I worked with him as well. And he's incredibly special, incredibly talented, man. Like he's like, I was talking to him, I'm trying to figure out how to talk to a kid about like his problems and stuff, and worded like he's 12 years old, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how would I have been, when I was 12 years old, right? Because what his mom told me, he's kind of like I was. So I started talking to him, and I was like, yeah, like, what kind of stuff do you like to do? Like, do you like playing music? Or you like art or anything like that? Or do you like more sports and that sort of thing, right? Like, trying to figure out what kind of stuff you like. He's like, yeah, I really like music. Like, I know how to play the drums, and I can play the guitar and do this. And he's like, I really like playing the piano, too. He's like, I don't know how to read music, but when I play the piano, I just kind of listen to the song, and then I can play it.
And I was like, he's a musical genius.
That's what I said. I was like, do you know who else knew how to do that? Fucking Elton John knows how to do that.
Mozart,
right? I was like, that's how Elton John learned how to play music. He didn't know how to write or read music. He just heard a song and started playing it on the piano. And this kid is 12 and he plays 4 instruments. And he plays 2 different sports, but he's shy and awkward and not confident because of like a bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the normal 12-year-old stuff, right? And it's like, how do we get more people in society to recognize like how special that is in someone? Because if that kid is, comes up properly and God forbid nothing, he's not tripped up by somebody, that's a person that's capable of doing amazing things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that all people are born with something like that, right? It's not just miracle babies who have these talents, right? I mean, maybe it is, but I think we all have natural abilities, but we just don't get to recognize them at an early enough age, or if we do recognize them, oftentimes they're discouraged, right? They're not encouraged by people to grow those talents and abilities.
I've had this kind of chat in a similar sense with my grandpa. He talks about this, like, everyone's born with gifts, right? You come into this world and you've got, whether you're a gifted musician or a gifted writer or whatever, and it's not like our gift is something that you whether you're good at it or not, you still have to develop that gift, right? And I think, like you said early on, so many of these people with these gifts, they're it's stifled at a really early age because of one reason or another. I think I'm not gonna lie, I hate the structure of school in a lot of ways for
that's a major issue right now.
Yeah,
that's starting to become a topic because our generation of kids, who were the last generation of kids to go through that type of school system where we were like, this fucking doesn't make sense to us. Why are we learning to be these cookie cutter people sitting in fucking literally rows of desks that were designed to simulate factories, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are we still doing this? Right? This doesn't make sense.
I think especially right now because you look at the job market and everything, and it's easier than ever for somebody to make a living strictly on their own creativity. And
that's 100%, right?
And if you don't if you don't develop that, if you don't work on that, you are going to fall so far behind, right? And it's kind of incredible. Like,
look at this, okay? If you look at things from a bigger picture, you got 2 groups of people right now. Well, actually, you actually do have 2 groups of people, and it's not the right and the left, okay? In this example, the right and the left are actually in one group. They're actually in the same group. This is the only group where they exist together, and then the middle is actually its own group somewhere else over here. So you've got the right and the left, the extreme right and left, the people who are putting all their focus and effort into anti-COVID mask marches and all these civil rights stuff that is like, not this, okay, civil rights, let me put this first. Civil rights and the focal point of racial equality and equality of any kind should 100% be in the spotlight always, and it should never be an issue of someone having less rights than another person.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that first and foremost. But the overuse and the weaponization of those movements and those groups of people is what causes the turmoil that we see, right? And I think that puts those people on the far right and the far left in this group together because they're really in it. And if you ask any of those people, they're all in it for their own reason, for their own intention, for their own good, for essentially their own ego, right?
Yeah.
And that group of people are the ones who are suffering right now. These groups of people who are obsessing over COVID regulations and obsessing over these marches and other stuff like that. These are the people who are getting COVID. These are the people who are being affected by police brutality and these ridiculous, 200 police officers surrounding a church because this church goes out and goes, fuck you, we're not going to wear masks, you can't tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Guess what? You just brought all that stuff to yourself. This never would have happened if you didn't have to make that big statement of we're not going to fucking listen to you and do this and make a whole point of it. If you had just done your thing for your own reasons and let people come and didn't advertise it to the world for your own benefit, we're going to be the ones who fight back first, right? This wouldn't have happened. And so you don't have these extreme events manifest because of these things, right? If you don't take those actions, these things don't fucking happen.
Yeah.
So you have these people taking action towards those things, creating these problems. And then you have this small group that's been growing over here, which is people like you, people like me, people who we're finding each other right now and going, okay, I'm sick of this left and right shit. I want to grow this. I want to grow something good that isn't left and right, that isn't polarizing, but is everybody helping each other. So when you grow something new where everyone's dependent on each other, then you can't have that, okay, one person rules all type deal where you cut the legs out from under everyone. Because you can cut the legs out from this guy, and guess what? He's got 100 more people that he's connected to that are going to keep him up, that are going to keep him standing, because that's the way we've built it, right? So that's why I'm so passionate about what we're doing, is because yes, it's small right now, but when people start to find out the benefit of being in a positive community and in a community where the awareness of what negativity does grows, wait until you see what this community is capable of.
Yeah.
Because then the stuff that they're arguing about on the right and the left, it doesn't affect you. And that's why I'm not paying attention to COVID stuff. That's why I haven't paid attention to any of these terrible things that have been happening, because my life's been good so far, because I've just been living day to day, living with what's happening in my world, not what's happening in social media, not what's happening from people telling me the news, but what I see in front of me, what I talk to my friends about, what they're experiencing in their days, right? That's what I live.
Yeah,
so
and you're also very much in a position where you're able to do that.
And geographically, especially, I'm in a position where I can do that, right?
So
not everybody is.
You look at obviously probably one of the most affected people with all of these regulations are restaurant owners, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of been interesting in Sundry here Sundry holds the last couple, I guess, since it happened, we're on week 2, literally a full week since it kind of came out. Initially, people were so sick of, not being able to operate under the seemingly non-restraint guidelines or whatever. What am I trying to say? There's no consistency in why they're not able to operate. People were sick of it. So people were like, as restaurants, we're going to band together and we're going to stay open. And pretty quickly that went, that got kiboshed. But just as fast as that happened, people have, started creating these incredible patios because that's what's allowed.
But that's the attitude.
It's incredible. So it was it went from this, kind of very negative thing that brought all of these restaurant owners together to a very positive thing that kind of it was like, you know what? Well, let's turn this into something that.
And I'll say this too. To your point of like me being in a position, like a privileged position where I'm able to, avoid that sort of thing. I'm responsible for the position I'm in. I put myself here. I did the work I needed to do to get to a position where I don't have to worry about that stuff. And I didn't start ahead of everybody else. I mean, other than being born a white male and having those generic privileges, I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. I didn't have power in my family growing up, right? I didn't have any. My dad has a grade 10 education, has busted his ass to be manual labor his whole life. My mom is the only person in my family with a college degree, and she's worked for people her whole life. If they continue the way they're going, it'll take them the rest of their life to pay off their mortgage, right? Like, I don't have a head start on a lot of people other than my ethnicity and my gender, and I didn't choose that stuff, right? But what I did choose was to say, I'm not going to live in a world of shit. I'm not going to surround myself with shit. So, yeah, I lived on an acreage when I was a kid, and I lived in a house where I wasn't abused, and my parents raised me properly, and that is the biggest advantage I had, right, was having a family that cared about me. Because if you have that, and you have support, that's all you need to get out of your situation. If you're geographically, if you're in a bad situation, you can move. You can get out of there if you have the right support. If you don't have the right support, you can't. If you don't have family you can rely on, you have to find other people that are going to support you. A lot of times, the people who don't have family to support them fall back on people who support them for the wrong reasons. They support the bad things they want, right? And that's what puts you in a bad situation. It gives you bad beliefs and bad values. If you find people who support you for the right reasons, you can do anything. You can move out of that. You create your reality.
Which is essentially what we're trying to do here. Just create such a large support group that everybody can go up.
Yeah, awesome. These people who are living in turmoil right now, who are surrounding themselves with other people who are living in turmoil and are living in fear of the virus, or are living in hate and fear of people who don't care about the virus, right? Like, that's fighting in disguise. Because even though it's not physical fighting, and you're not fighting with your fists, you're fighting with your feelings and your energy and your anger and your hatred towards those other groups, which amplifies that. That's why the only way to fight that is to not. It's almost hard to describe, because you're not deflecting it, you're not absorbing it. It's like not caring.
It's kind of when you go to the whole practice of meditation, it's very much that is the exact same thing. The more you try and fight everything that comes into your mind and like try and bat away the thoughts as opposed to just letting them happen and being okay with that, it's the harder it becomes, the harder you try, and the less meditating you actually do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's essentially the same concept.
The more you chase it, the more you fight against not being able to meditate, the harder it is to meditate.
Exactly.
Right? You just have to let go. Stop caring. Listen, if people didn't freak out and make, COVID such a big deal, and the population did, okay, I'm going to put this in a different perspective for you, okay? Picture a guy, picture a person, picture yourself, actually, picture yourself. And you are sitting on the couch watching TV, and you get a phone call from work, and it's your boss. Your boss goes, hey, you don't get a call from your boss very often, so you know it's important, and he's calling you. And you go, hey, you have a pretty important job yourself, so it must be really important. And you go, hey, how's it going? Good. Well, things are not good on our end, right? There's a virus, and it's coming. We don't know what to do about it. We know it's in China. We know it's bad. We've only heard things about it, and all we're hearing is going to be the one, right? This is the next virus, right? Well, you immediately get this information early, so you start to build contingency plans and stuff like that for yourself and your family, and you're doing all this stuff, and you are worried about it because you've got this information now and you have it, but that's the only information you have, right? Now, picture you're you, but you're also now the Prime Minister of Canada. You're also the Premier of Alberta, right? You're just a person, but you have a job title that says you're responsible for these millions of other people. And so your decision, however you make that decision, it doesn't matter how many advisors you have, who are also just people, how many proposals you get, who are all drawn up and written by people, right? You have to make a decision based on the way that you feel about that thing. And as a leader, as a politician who has to say, yes, we're going to put regulations in because I think this, or because someone told me this and this. But really what that is you going, I think this because of that information, right? It's a person making a decision. So we cannot have a government that makes decisions for the group. We need to have the group make decisions for the group. So there needs to be a form of government where people have a say in what we do, down to the individual citizen, right? Whether that's through an app where we, like a literal app that everyone gets on their fucking smartphone, because everyone has a smartphone by now, and if they don't, the government can pay for a fucking iPhone 6 for people. Like, I've seen homeless dudes on the street with iPhones, okay? We all have phones. If you get everybody gets an app on their phone, it automatically downloads it. It's a voting app, and you put all your registration information in it, and every single time there's an issue, face masks, a gender, identification issue, whether it's boys being allowed to use girls' bathrooms in school, everybody gets to vote, and all it takes is 1 second, and you see live results, and yeah, you can say it's all, I'm sure there's stuff you can do on the back end to make it safe for the technology-wise, but that way, it's like the results don't lie, people. If you're a person who's responsible and you voted on this issue because it affects you and it affects millions of other people, there's no one to blame. There's no Jason Kenney to put on the fucking spot and say, hey, dickhead, you're making the wrong move. Fuck you, and cause all this turmoil, right? And there's no Justin Trudeau to get voted in for being pretty and make all these terrible decisions that he's been doing because of what he thinks is right, which the guy has no idea how to lead sheep, let alone lead a fucking country, okay? So, that puts it back on the people. And then all the government is responsible is for what people need, is what we want, what we need, healthcare, fire and police, okay, security. Provide security for people. That's it. Everything else, we should be in charge of. We should be in charge of our money, our equity, how we do. Not like, obviously there needs to be regulations around finances and economics and stuff like that, yeah. But privatize government to the individual in terms of how things are voted on, how things are decided on, because then you don't get these bills that are passed underneath where people go, oh, that doesn't matter. They sneak all these tiny little laws in there that screw everybody over or restrict us in some way.
Yeah. So I think
Ready for the rant.
No, it's good. I like the idea of the people having more say, and I think democracy, that was the whole point of it, was that the people would be able to have say, right? And you're just represented. You make your voice heard through a representative, right? That's the whole point of democracy. But we're now. You had your rant. Let me.
I'm gonna write this down so I don't forget.
Yeah, dude. So we're at an interesting point where we do have the technology, like you said, to explore these options, and I think it's a really cool thing. So the trick is, right now, if anybody running a business trying to compete for attention, that's essentially what it is when it comes to marketing. They know that you need to get people's attention on all of these things. So say we have, whatever bill coming across the table, and it's time for the people to vote. What if, same as anything, there's so many different rules and regulations with everything that I don't know that the entire population would.
There's a way to transmit. There's a way to translate it to people. Make it better.
Well, not even translate it to people, but there's so many things that come across the table that at some point.
But I'm talking about key issues. I'm talking about we're making federal mandates for masks. Okay, everybody get your voter out because this is not This is something that affects all of us.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about small bills that affect little things here and there that are within government or within regulations to a certain point. I'm talking about stuff that affects the masses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you'd have to instate definitions for those types of bills at that point, right? But the point I was going to make to you is, you said it yourself. We have the technology now, right? The democracy was developed by the Greeks in fucking like 800 AD or some shit, right? Like it hasn't been worked on since then. Like there's been no update. We still are represented by a person who's supposed to represent a population much, much larger than democracy was originally planned a population to handle, right? But now we've developed our technology to a point where we can have the democratic process, but still have, instead of a representative who's supposed to be and knowledgeable because we're all voting them in. I don't know where these fucking people come from. All I know is they show up on my ballot and they say a bunch of stuff, and I have to vote one of them in because I don't have a choice. And if I don't vote, I'm an asshole, right? So if you do your education on these people, you can find your proper candidate out of them. But even that, it's like, I didn't get any say in who got to go into this. I didn't get to pick the 5 people who were running for that position that you then chose, 5 people out of each of those groups, right? I didn't get to look at that or see how that process was done.
Yeah.
But so why are these people representing what I'm supposed to be saying? That doesn't make any sense to me. Just because I pay my taxes and my bills and stuff, that doesn't, and I'm compliant with that sort of thing, that doesn't mean they're representing my opinion.
Yeah.
So if I have an outlet for that, like an application that allows me to voice that allows me to be a part of that, then of course I'm going to be a part of that process.
Yeah. I think there's another, it's a combination of anything. There's no one right answer, but I've kind of thought of this concept of how government might operate. And to a certain extent, I guess the U.S. does it a little bit, where your smaller regions have a lot more power. They have more power, they have more control over their money and this and that. And it kind of allows the people making a lot of these bigger decisions, they're so much more closely related to or connected to the people that they're making the decisions, for. So if, say, Albertans often feel like we get screwed over by the East because what we need is so different than what they need, right? And yet what they need is so different than what we need. Unfortunately for us, there's a lot more of them, so they have a little bit more voting power. So if you were to distribute, a little bit more of this power, a little bit more money to your smaller communities, to, provinces, then all of these problems could be solved in a much more local way. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's the problem of pointing the fire extinguisher at the tip of the flame, right? That's what we've been doing for so long with government. It's just, what's the cycle of government, right? Okay, you get your 4-year cycle. Someone gets voted in. All they do is spend the first 2 years, like you said. I don't know if this was you that told me.
Yeah, we were talking about this last week.
Yeah, they spend the first 2 years trying to reverse what the other guy did, and then they spend the next 2 years creating more of a deficit, right? So all you get is deficit. Well, all we're focusing on is the deficit. That's what we're going to get. All we're going to get is deficit. So why don't we start focusing on ways to generate things instead of doing things the same way we've done things over and over again, which again is the definition of psychotic, right? The government is literally psychotic if you put it into that term. Like, we're going to get the same results. We have to do something different.
Yeah.
We have to try something else. It can't, and what that thing needs to be, and the reason why it hasn't happened yet, is take power away from the government and give it to individual people in the form of responsibility. And we have to empower people with the knowledge to be responsible. That should be the big initiative. Give the common person the knowledge to support themselves. That's been the opposite of what controlling powers have wanted since day one, which is why it's taken so fucking long for us to get to this point. Because you have those controlling powers, and they don't want to give that up. And it's because it's attached to their egos on an individual level. I don't care if you're the prime minister, the secretary to the prime minister. Everyone has an ego, and we all do things, these little tiny things in our day-to-day lives, and small actions which create large consequences, and nothing changes because we're not willing to give up and shift that power to where it needs to go, which is to the individual person. To say that, you know what? We used to just say, oh, that guy's crazy, right? You used to see a homeless person on the street screaming and talking to himself, and that guy's crazy. That's what that was. It didn't mean anything other than that guy's crazy, right? That's just how he is. He's just crazy. Well, no. What we know now is that his brain is not working properly because he was abused as a kid, and he was beaten, or he was, a child of a drug use, right? Yeah. There's a reason his brain's not working properly. So we can help that person. We know how to. So we can stop that unpredictability from happening, right? We can continue to build those people up and put them in a place that's going to be suitable for them, help them in an environment that will work for them. Now, that might be the only case where it's possible for us to determine what's better for someone else, right? Because there you're crossing a line. There you're setting a precedent, right? Which is we're determining what's okay for someone else. We're determining that this person is mentally unfit to take control of their own lives, right? And therefore, that's causing a detriment to society, right? That's where you start to see problems. That's where you start to see segregation again. Yeah. So it's like, how do you solve that problem? That problem of giving responsibility to people who are not able to handle it, right? And I'll ask you, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think would be a good solution to something like that? Like, other than what we're doing, which is trying to teach people about it, but even at that point, they have to be willing to learn it. Otherwise, it still isn't going to work.
Yeah,
right?
I think you're like spot on with the whole. The more responsibility people have, generally, the more they care about learning more about that particular subject, right? Yeah. So the willingness to learn becomes all of a sudden, it's there anytime you have to, because this directly affects you. But I think a big part of why people tend to be so ignorant on a lot of these subjects is because they feel they have no power, like you said, to do anything about it. So why would I look further than, that one news article that I saw from this particular source or whatever, right? So I think you're spot on. I think kind of the thing that kept going through my mind was how do we get to that point? Because one of the biggest issues with government is it moves so damn slow. And
you put the responsibility on corporations. And you have to put the responsibility on responsible corporations. And you have to have the trust that those corporations are going to be doing the right thing. Now,
and how do you get to that point, though?
And maybe corporation's the wrong word. Corporation might not be the right word.
Yeah.
A business like ours, a group of individuals who have taken it upon themselves, whether it's through a sense of duty or through a sense of the greater good, whatever it is, right? Through a sense of that this is a good way to find success in community, whatever that reason is, you have to have people that follow that calling, right? And join the movement, which is to move away from the extreme sides of things, which is to unite things and help each other on an individual basis instead of giving power to a single entity, whether it's the government, the king, the queen, a single person. I don't care, right? When you give power to one thing, one entity, one mass moving as one thing, then that thing always and will inherently never want to surrender that power, and it will always inherently slow progress because of that.
Yeah.
So if you give power to everyone, then you just have synergy. That's literally what it is. I had to draw this. I might try to draw this out for you, but this is how I explained it to...
do you want to do are you just going to draw it? And then
I'm just going to draw it on a sticky note.
Okay,
so you can see it. So let's picture, I'm going to draw one circle here and one circle here, okay? I'll show you. So
I'm going to judge you based on the
okay.
circleness
Those are
of your
pretty good
circles.
circles.
Not bad. Not bad.
Okay, so you see how they're touching there, right? So let's let each of those circles represent a business or an individual that owns a business. Okay, in our case, we're talking about business.
Sure.
As soon as they come together and touch, they're doing business, right? They're working together. If this one has what this one needs and this one has what this one needs, they work together, right? And they help each other out. This is going to be the best analogy ever. I need a microphone to drop after this. Okay, and so then you have these two businesses, these two individuals working together, right? And they're helping each other because this one has what this one needs and this one has what this one needs. Then you say, okay, well, we have another need that neither one of us can help each other with, right? Well, if you gave me extra to do this, I might be able to develop something to solve that problem. Right? Well, if you same here though. But then I'm losing and you're gaining. Then you're losing and you're gaining. It's not synergy anymore. Yeah. So what do? You find something that does have what you need. You find something that has what both of you need. Right? So then you bring in business number 3. And business number 3 goes right there. Okay? And now you're all working together. And what you've done there is you've actually created synergy. Sorry, I was getting a phone call there. But you've actually created. So you've actually created synergy. That's what you've done there, right? And do you know what else does that? What does that look like under a fucking microscope, Adam?
Well, cells.
It looks like cells, right? Yeah. And what are cells? Cells are the building blocks of life. Mm-hmm. That is how life works. If you get in line with the way that life works, things work for you. If you model your business after the way life works, your business will work. If you model your relationships after the way life works, your relationships will work. You have to be able to work in a synergistic manner. Yeah. If I have a problem, like I'm lucky enough to have a girlfriend that we work perfectly together. We do nothing but help each other get better because we figured out how to do that. Mm-hmm. Some people don't have that in a relationship. Some people try to join a relationship. It's not right. So what do? They bring in a third person to try to help them. Yeah. Sometimes it's enough. But as soon as that third person leaves, guess what? They fall apart again, right? Or in some cases, maybe they stay together because they fixed whatever that problem was. One of them wasn't balancing properly, right? But whenever you need that, you have to find help. You have to find synergy. And when you find that, just like a cell joins another cell, to get bigger or have the power or get what it needs to split, right? To divide. You get evolution. So then you have to have that ability. You have to be able to join those businesses, those people together when you need that help and find that synergy and grow together. And then when you find other groups like that, you create more and more synergy and eventually you have your bigger picture, right? And it all comes together. So it's a really simple concept. It's just really hard for people to understand unless you explain it to them in a way that makes sense, right? And relate it to things in our lives.
Yeah, I think it's kind of again, it goes back to like for the longest time in human history, we try to delegate these responsibilities to smaller and smaller groups because it's almost impossible to get a lot of people to come to a consensus and to agree on certain things, right? So I think there will always be some form of that. But let me finish. But I think
it's gonna be a bad podcast for that.
I think because we now have the technology to to be able to get opinions and utilize like these huge amounts of data that come from the massive population that we have, to not take advantage of that is kind of insane, right? And to not go with the times. But I'm again gonna kind of play the devil's advocate. How do you expedite that whole process? Because currently the people in charge that are going to hold your corporations and groups of people responsible to do these things and to operate in these manners, it's the government. And like we said before, the government moves so damn slow. So it's kind of it's like a tricky,
I've got an answer for that question.
All right.
You don't rely on the government. You build it in a way that doesn't rely on the government. It's just like I said, the government would be another leg of that business, right? So here's the example. My business is looking at a potential government contract, right? Mm-hmm. But if we don't get that contract, that's not the end of my business. Yeah. That doesn't affect me at all. As a matter of fact, it doesn't make me go backwards at all. It just doesn't move me forwards if I don't get that, right? Based on equity alone. That's it. So I've built my business in a way that I'm not dependent on that. You could take that away from me. All government support. I have none right now. So why would I need their support in building this thing? If I build it in a way that is the individual, again, you don't need to rely on your government to support that. So those government regulations that we have to rely on, like the corporations, don't build it in a corporation. So how do you do that? Well, a platform, right? You need a platform. If you don't have a corporation, you need some other sense of organization. So what do we rely on? The internet, platforms. What's the biggest problem with the platforms out there right now? They're not regulated. Yeah. They're not regulated, right? And who's going to regulate them? Well, again, when it comes to questions that affect the group, it needs to be based on what that entity is, right? So let's say we'll use the platform that we're growing right now, which is Dia. So let's say we have this community page on Dia, right? We can guarantee on Dia that there's not going to be any racist stuff like based on a printed out guideline. Mm-hmm. Under these conditions, if you have anything to say under this, or this, it's not allowed on this platform. It doesn't matter. And this is a subscription platform. It's not free, so it's not your right to join. This is a business that you have to pay for. I'm allowed to refuse you business. Yeah. Therefore, you're not allowed to be on my paid platform. Now, the people who agree with that can come on this platform. They can pay for that subscription. They subscribe to avoid the person who doesn't want to pay that subscription, right? Who wants the freedom of anonymity to post whatever they want, whenever they want. And Facebook and Instagram are tied down by free advertising, right? That's because that's how they generate their money. If they stop advertising, they can't do anything, right? They lose their entire business. That's how they operate. Yeah. So if we're a business and all we're providing is the platform for this to happen, a place for these people to come who are willing to be a part of that, who understand, hey, I can't be a dick, otherwise I'm going to get kicked off. I'm here for one purpose. This website is here for one thing, to communicate about this issue, which is business. And that issue is how to make your business better. It's not how to sell things. It's not how to advertise for things. It's nothing like that. It's just to help other people. Mm-hmm. And the only people that will be on it will be the people who understand that. Yeah. Right? And see the benefit in it and see the growth and receive that growth from it.
The trick behind that, though, is you leave behind all of those people that aren't on the platform. How did it, if you want to get...
But you're not leaving behind anyone, I don't think. I think the people who...
You leave behind the people that
What do you mean leave behind them?
Well,
how are we
there's
leaving
going to be a number of people that straight up, they don't want to be on the platform, or they don't want to be a part of these.
Okay, but this is it again. Well, that's their individual choice. It comes down to them, right? We are not affecting them. So.
Yeah, but if you're trying to regulate, if you're trying to have a platform that is like all-encompassing and giving everybody a say in something.
It's not all-encompassing. That's the whole point.
Okay.
It's not all-encompassing. It's eliminating anything ego-driven. That's the goal.
So
anything that's about a person's individual opinion, if it's like, there's no perfect solution, I don't think. Okay, I'll say that right now. I don't think there's no such thing as perfection, because the only thing that comes close to perfection is the pursuit of perfection, right? And that's why we all admire heroes, and that's often why they don't see themselves as heroes, because all they're doing is pursuing perfection. They're
That's
not
why you
perfect.
don't want to meet your heroes. No.
Yeah, I do want to meet my heroes. Except my hero died in a helicopter crash last year. So, but so sorry, I'm off my train of thought there. But there's no perfect solution. So the solution is going to be the pursuit of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all pursuing a common goal as a group, and that is the betterment of society, then that's as good as things are going to get. Because cycles, that's the thing about cycles. There's no end point. There's no stop point, right? Life is a cycle. Life is a circle, okay? Everything in life is represented by circles and cycles, right? And we're no different. The pursuit of bettering humanity is no different. Mm-hmm. But if we stop looking at humanity on a bell curve and start looking at it on that reciprocating cycle of what did we fail at, learn it, get better, and move forward, instead of focusing on what that thing was that caused us to fail, or the a different direction we could go instead of this one, and giving up on what we were trying to do of bettering society, right, and going with a different political system, going back to socialism, right, because that'll be so much better than democracy. Okay, we'll see about that.
Well, those are two. Not to say,
okay. And I don't know enough about socialism to
socialism
talk about it.
And democracy, they work hand in hand. It's a form of,
I think, but that's what it was. Okay, so how did you get democracy? You take a view of socialism.
You're thinking of communism.
No, socialism and communism together, and you take the best aspects of those things together, and you basically get democracy, right? The freedom of the good of the whole, right? Mm-hmm. That fascism provides, but in either concept, you end up with a dictator. That's the only problem. And the I don't know enough about politics to be having this conversation with you right now.
That's fair.
Because I'm just going to get chewed apart. But either way, what I'm talking about is...
Nobody roast coal in the comments.
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't give a shit. I don't read comments. Roast me all you want.
It'll help.
I'm not a politician. I'll be the first to admit that. But I have an opinion, and it's educated more so than a lot of people. So I provide that opinion. That's all I can do. People don't agree with me. Great, right? It's the same thing as what we're. It's the same. If people don't agree with me, I'm willing to have a conversation. That's the difference. So it's not like I'm shut off from other opinions, right?
I want to kind of go back again, play the devil's advocate here. So
I think that's going to be your role in this podcast. Playing the devil's advocate.
So if we take this this group that has these ideals I won't even say ideals. These are the rules on this platform, and we're trying to build for the better of the larger group, and we're going to all come together and do this. What makes that any different than, say, the first, the bringing about of the Constitution and when we screw up the Declaration of Independence?
Even you can go further back than that. How about the Ten Commandments?
Sure.
Right? How about the Ten Commandments? Those are the clearest laws we've ever had outlined. Hey, don't do this stuff. And you know what? They weren't laws. They weren't laws. The Ten Commandments, the literal things that people say God told us not to do, they're not laws. They are don't do this. Hey, just don't do this. Yeah. This is the rules of life. If you want to be a good person and help progress things, don't do these 10 things, and you will help move things forward.
Yeah.
Because essentially what those 10 things are is the 10 the 10 manifestations that ego can cause you to do. Mm-hmm. Right? I was watching Westworld the other night. Okay, I started watching Westworld.
Is it good?
And yeah, it's really good.
I avoid watching live action series because each hour-long episode gets me I get entertained way too fast, and next thing I know, it's 4 in the morning, and
I have to cut myself off after 2 episodes. But I'm lucky enough that I don't think the pace of the show is fast enough that it's gotten me super sucked into binge watching it.
Yeah.
But the first few episodes have been pretty good. It's all just lining up right now.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry. The example I was going to say was I started watching Westworld, and what I noticed was they started talking about how they created this concept of Westworld, and his one partner created it for the pursuit of consciousness, right? He got lost in the pursuit of consciousness. And so he designed these robots and implanted this AI technology in them, which was the closest thing that they could get to consciousness, but he couldn't find out what the last piece was. And he described it in a triangle, and I don't remember the layers of the triangle, but essentially he said there were 4 layers to the triangle. There was first, second, third, and then the third one was self-interest, right? And that was the last one he'd come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And the top of the triangle was where he was missing. That was his pursuit. What is the missing piece that comes before self-interest? Because self-interest is our motivator. It's a subconscious response. It's a protective instinct, right? We all respond for self-interest. But what's that thing that comes before self-interest, which makes you jump in front of a bus for your kid? Right? What's that thing?
Yeah.
What's that thing that when you have to press on whatever your challenge is, and you know consciously that it's going to hurt. Let's compare it to sports,
Sure.
right? You're burning, and you're in practice, and you're going, and you know you're going to puke. You know your legs are going to collapse. You know you're it's feeling sick. It's physically hurting your body, but for some reason you push through that. It's not in your self-interest, right? Your immediate self-interest, but it's something motivating you. So what is that thing? And you know what I said? I was like, I know what that is. That's purpose to me. When I look at that, I say that's purpose. What is the core thing? The only thing that takes more precedence to ourselves than self-interest is purpose. Whether it's children, whether it's your wife, whether it's your job, whether it's your hobby, people who pursue a purpose are the ones who become successful. They are the ones who we look up to. They're the ones that we idolize and call gods and can't figure out how they've done all these amazing things. Well, it's simple. They said, that's my purpose, and I'm going to do that thing, and I'm committing to that, whatever it takes, right? And people without a purpose have only self-interest. Their first layer is self-interest. And if you don't have purpose to override that self-interest, then your self-interest comes before everything else. And you can't even begin to see how it's possible that someone else could make a decision based on something that's not their self-interest. Mm-hmm. So if I'm telling you something, it must be based on my self-interest. Well, no. I'm actually telling you this because it's based off my purpose. What I believe is my purpose, right? And each individual person has to go through that process of figuring out who they are, what their ego has developed in them, and how that's hiding their true purpose. Because a lot of times we confuse our purpose for self-interest, and it's not the same thing. It's opposite, but yet they're so close together. The only reason you need that self-interest is when it comes to the protection of your purpose. That's it.
You know what's really ironic about that whole, I don't know, the segue into that? So you could argue that, the creator of Westworld is, he, in a lot of ways, his purpose was finding consciousness, right? And in the pursuit of finding consciousness, he was unable to identify the fact that was.
But if you watch the show, though, he completed his purpose. Yeah. He created consciousness. Yeah. He did it without even knowing how. That's the whole thing. He completed his purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting, man.
So it all works that way, man. That's what I'm trying to tell people. Is if you look at any negative situation, I say this about the situation that we've put First Nations populations in. What did we do when we came into this country? I've read a bunch of books on this. I read, actually my favorite one that I read was Empire of the Summer Moon, and I'm actually reading one right now. I don't read it, it's not either. It's called Black Elk, and both of these books are outlined. Empire of the Summer Moon is about the Comanche warriors in the U.S. and how the Texas Rangers basically were created to get rid of the Comanches. And then blackout takes place in Canada and the U.S., and so a little bit of Empire of San Raimundos too. But what happened was we came in and we were this foreign entity, this thing that they had actually had warnings from their spirit guides and things like that in their culture that this force was coming, this storm was coming, and the world was never going to be the same again, right? And we came in and we tore apart their lives, we segregated them, we experimented on them, and we first and foremost took away their culture, which in their culture was embedded their purpose, right? Their purpose in life is embedded in their culture. And that's why First Nations hang on to that so tightly still, I believe. I'm not First Nation, so I can't speak for people who are, but I believe that, right? That their purpose lies within their culture. And that's why it's such a terrible thing when we take that from them and try to get them to integrate away from it. And when we do that, when we put them on reserves and we give them free money, or we give one of them free money and they decide where it goes, then you get situations like an overwhelmingly amount of homeless people who are addicted to drugs and have been abused and grew up in poverty because of this stuff. You take their purpose. Yeah. You go out and find a purpose for those people. You interject in those abusive family relationships and find a purpose for the mom and dad. If it's not too late, right, to interject, you can save that. You can stop this cycle from happening by finding purpose for things. Right?
And I think it's kind of interesting too, looking at it from, I guess, the intruding perspective, is the whole reason for that was, the whole reason for a crusade or for, a mission is to like project our culture on somebody else, right? That was the thinking. Like, we need to, our purpose in life is to,
and that came from a lack of understanding of other cultures.
Like the white man's burden. I think the French had their own, or the Spanish. But either way, like, what an insane thing to think that my purpose is this. But that's, so it's kind of like it's,
but
that's
it's just, that comes down to,
that's the root of both of these issues.
I have to disagree. I have to disagree with your last point, though. I have to disagree, because I'm going to interject and say that was not their purpose. They were told that was their purpose. And they were told by an individual. They were told by a church leader.
They were told that,
crusade,
but they took it.
They
took it as their purpose. They took it so wholly as their purpose. Yeah,
they accepted it because a very intelligent power disguised a purpose in self-interest. And gave it to them, and played to their self-interest, and told them that it was their purpose, and it sure felt like it, because it feels real good when we do something for our own self-interest. But for people who complete their purpose, they're the only people who know the true feeling of that, and how much better that feels than serving your own self-interest. And when you experience your purpose, and you experience that thing, you realize that serving your own self-interest a lot of times isn't the best situation, isn't the best thing to do. And when an extremely intelligent power like the Pope or the King, who are the only ones back in the day with education and access to this knowledge and this grandeur of knowledge they have, which happens to keep them, again, in a position where they don't want to give up power, so therefore they keep their following in ignorance. And they play to their egos, and they play to their self-interest, and say, it's in your self-interest to go on this crusade and make all these people righteous because they are heathens, and they don't know any better because they don't have access to this knowledge. Well then, it's awfully easy to get confused with self-interest with purpose. But if they had relied on their own instincts, their own ability to connect with whatever consciousness is, and realize that the Pope is just a guy. He's not who's figured it out maybe, or hasn't figured it out and is pretending he has, which is a kind of self-interest thing, and go, oh, well, we're all the same. We can all do that. I don't need a pope. I don't need a church. I don't need a king because I can do it. I can figure out my purpose by examining who I am, by understanding my feelings and emotions, by understanding my natural wants and needs, not by being told what's in my fucking self-interest by a higher power, and then doing bad things and making mistakes because of that. You were told it's in your better interest to go to college and get a degree. You're told it's in your better interest to go to high school and learn all the shit that they have to learn, right? Well, all the people who have done all the best things for their own self-interest are the most powerful people in the world. Elon Musk, fucking Jeff Bezos. I mean, even though I think he's in some hot water over like a dick pic or something, I have no idea. But like it's a perfect example. All we have to do is teach people how to access that inner power, which is what you're seeing right now. You're seeing this movement. You're seeing this movement of what? Meditation, right? Meditation, finding yourself, self-love. That's the positive thing that's coming out of COVID and all this hatred that's happened in the U.S. and all this stuff, right? Is the self-love movement is coming out of this. That's the most important movement that's come out of this whole thing. Because when people discover self-love, then they're going to discover how much of an asshole we've all been to each other. And we're going to be like, shit, I got to start changing my life. That's what psychedelics do for people. They just make you realize it right fucking now. Yeah. Right? That's why people make such drastic changes in their life. They're not going crazy. They're just offloading all the shit that they don't need. And they've realized that. Right? And, I mean, I'm sure some people have psychotic breakdowns or they do stuff like that because of the way their brains are wired and stuff. But, like, it's such a simple concept. And I think the fact that all we have to do is share that with people. And people will go, this kind of makes sense. And it will share itself. And then it's no longer containable. It can't be shut down because it's not one person, right? It's not a Jesus of Nazareth who's going around claiming, or not, helping all these people and being the person who's doing this and initiating everything, and then the church comes in and kills them, or whatever, and shuts them up and stops this movement. Well, no. What happened? He taught people, right? And the word spread, and then you had Christianity, and then Christianity got ruined by an ego, by someone who decided to take it in their own self-interest.
So,
right?
How do we prevent that from happening? Also, I got to turn the lights on, and before you go down another route here, I know it creeps some people out, but I got to take my contacts out. You're driving me nuts.
Do it on camera for people. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, they love that. This is why they tune in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we had 3 viewers at one point, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, we got 3 right now.
My dad, your mom, and me.
Yeah, and me. Yeah. No, I think that what I was going to say was the only way to prevent that from happening, I think, is ensuring strong leadership, right? And then again, it comes down to how do you ensure strong leadership? Well, there's a reason that our ancient cultures used stories to convey information, right? There's a reason they didn't store information in data points, because that's up for interpretation. Stories carry a message, and yes, we all interpret stories differently. We all interpret certain details in stories differently and deeper and different in different ways. But there's a thing in a story which we always agree on, and that's the moral of the story, right? The moral of the story is always in one direction. It's either bad or good. And so the reason that we tell stories is because that's the easiest way to define bad or good. When that story was told, was it a happy feeling or a sad feeling? Was it a good thing or a bad thing? Right? Did it feel right or wrong? Well, a story is the easiest way to tell a person something and get them to understand it on a deeper level, because a story is one of the only things that we have that conveys emotion.
Yeah, I think
pictures and images movies and images are one of the only other things like a story, but what they're just doing the same thing. They're conveying a story.
I think we're in an interesting point now as well, though. Like being in the information age, so much data is out there that we can share stories through statistics and through
but that's detrimental.
Themselves. Is it though? If you educate people,
do you know how large these fucking server farms are getting? Do you know how much data there is produced every second on this planet?
Yeah. No, what I'm saying though is like, if you have the story of the, I don't know, we'll go the tortoise and the hare or whatever, and the tortoise won because he was slow and steady.
Okay.
But this may be a horrible example. I'm just kind of pulling this out off the top of my head. But now, and based on that story, it's like, okay, sometimes slow and steady does win the race, or it should win the race if we're looking at it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how it made me feel. But then when I look at the actual statistics, they're telling me something different, right? And this is what the actual story was. 9 times out of 10, the rabbit does win. Like for whatever reason. And I think we are very much in an age where
the rabbit's been winning for a long time.
No, not even that. We're in an age where there are so many different stories. It's like, which one do we believe, right? There's so many different stories, and the only way to properly identify those stories is to look at the data, the actual data. Right?
Do you know why there's no answer to what is the mystery of life? Because the pursuit of that mystery is what life is about, right? Without the mystery of life, there is no purpose of life. There isn't, other than achieving things, right? Other than inventing and creating things, there is no other purpose of life. There really isn't. There's not. It's not like.
And that goes back to the comment last week about our how humans need meaning in everything.
Mm-hmm. We need it. Right? We need purpose. Yeah. We need purpose. We need to be driven. Each individual person is driven. And again, it comes down to you have to. This is where science and religion are not opposite. Science and religion pursue the same goal. And I won't even say religion because I think religion has a bad taint to it now. I think spirituality is the better word to use here.
Yeah, I know.
So science and spirituality have the same goal. They have the same pursuit, which is the betterment of humanity, right? It's to make life better for people. Spirituality is there to make life easier. It's there so that we feel supported, so that we feel like there's something there that helps us along. Even when we're on our own, something's always got us. That's why spirituality is there, right? That's the betterment that it provides, is that security that people inherently need when they're alone.
I'll give you a counter, reason for that.
Okay, just one second. Okay, and science is the same thing. How do we make life better? How do we make life easier? For the most part, right? That's what science should be about. And discovering what these factors about life are, why they work certain ways, how they work certain ways, and how we can continue to learn those good things and those bad things and make life easier, right? So where's the disconnect? Well, the disconnect between spirituality and science is a lack of belief in that higher thing, that inherently good, inherently positive, higher, greater thing that unites us all. Right? Science doesn't have proof of that and cannot prove it until now, actually.
Yeah.
With the proof of consciousness as an actual physical thing that we just aren't able to see, but it's provable now, right? Through scientific data that it exists.
Yeah.
That's proof of God, essentially, is what they're saying, right? Is this space that we all exist in, that exists around us, that connects to all of us, that connects me with you, that explains quantum physics, right? It's the same thing, but we're finding out now how it makes sense, but there's still a barrier for some reason between scientific community and having the belief that there is something that is driving the purpose of humanity. That humanity as a whole has a goal, which is to... I'm going to take this way out into left field here.
Yeah, let's go.
And say that I think you could look at the bigger picture of humanity and say that our goal of humanity would be to raise the collective consciousness, okay, of humanity, aka the Earth, so that the Earth in its own being can rejoin with whatever this consciousness is at the center of the universe, okay, at the center of our universe.
Okay.
And that is because if you look at it, planets are essentially beings as well, right? People act and respond like cells in a body. We are cells in the body of the planet. The planet treats us accordingly. If we're attacking it, it attacks us.
Yeah.
If we are serving it, it helps us, right? So if you go outside and pick up a whole bunch of garbage off the ground, clean up an area for no reason and do something good, I'm willing to bet that you'll receive something in return from that. Out of what you could only explain as like coincidence, right? Something good would probably happen to you. And I'm saying that, and it's again completely unprovable. But this is the concept. That's that thing right there that science can't prove.
Actually,
right?
I'm gonna interject here. There was actually a guy, I think he was in like the late 1800s. I'm gonna look him up right now, who mathematically proved that all humans are inherently selfish. Like every action we take is inherently selfish. He mathematically proved this. Whether it was, diving in front of a bus to save our offspring or whatever, there's always some reward whether we know it or not. That's basically what he said.
So what about I know about to that point then? What if I were to say that this is what used to make holy men so special, is that they couldn't be true holy men, couldn't be persuaded by something that was in their self-interest because they served God, right? Because they served God. What does that mean now? If you were to say that now, to serve consciousness, right? To serve the universe, what are you supposed to do, right? Well, if I say the universe, what makes up the universe? The planets, the stars. Well, if I want to make up a healthy universe, I want to have healthy planets. So I should probably do my best to keep this planet healthy, right? Okay. Well, if I want to think about consciousness as that thing, then how do I help consciousness? Well, I make myself more conscious. I make myself a better person. And by doing inherently bad things, you can't help consciousness. Yeah. So if your goal in life is to better this mysterious thing, this thing that cannot be proven, right? Then your self-interest is not what comes first. That mathematical equation of it doesn't matter, unless you're saying you're somehow serving your self-interest by serving that thing, which I guess if you look at Christianity, you could say they are because they believe they go to heaven or whatever. What if I'm just serving this thing because I think that's what I need to do? Because I think that that's what's going to be the best option for the whole. I think do this.
Well, regardless of that, whether you think that or not, when you serve that, you're probably going to get a little hit of dopamine or something. Whether it's to a chemical thing in your brain, there's this is kind of what this talks about. And how is it? Okay, the man who proved that altruism is selfish. His name was George Price. And ironically, his research into selflessness led him to God. So anyways, he was born in 1922, so a lot more recent than I thought. Anyways, yeah, I think there's, whether it's arguments or not, it's not really anything worth arguing, but I think to a certain extent, I'm not saying I agree with this, but it's just an interesting, perspective. Whether we are inherently selfish people in everything we do, even though we may not realize it or not, I think there is still some, there can be good and bad that comes out of that. where
there has to be an aspect of self-interest. That is life's cruel game, I think.
Yeah.
So if I could, I'm gonna make another one of Cole's patented sticky note drawings here. This is gonna turn into a theme probably. If you had, let's say you
draw
have
them on the sticky side and just stick it right on the camera. No, that wouldn't work. Never mind.
Okay, let's say you actually I drew it wrong. I'm gonna draw it again.
I'm gonna get up and walk quick because the lights are gonna shut off again. We gotta fix this. Right. This is
you gotta get a timer on that.
In this place, this is my. This is the bane of my existence. This timing, this light sensor, it drives me nuts.
But it provides a nice piece of content watching you run around and jump, trying to get the motion.
That me taking contacts out.
Yeah.
What's next?
So see that?
Yeah.
Right. That big circle represents consciousness. That little circle represents ego and self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And although that part of it is small, and you can make it small because you don't need it to be big. Like you can make it as big as you want. You could take up the whole circle with that little one, right? But ideally, you want that to be what your mindset looks like. Mm-hmm. So your self-interest needs to be there, right? Because if you take that little circle out, there's going to be a hole. There's going to be a missing piece. It's not going to make sense.
Yeah.
You have to have it there. But life's cruel game is giving you self-interest, having you need self-interest in order to be motivated to innovate and make things better, right? But to not use it in a way that inflates it to a point where you rely on your self-interest.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's no, like, again, here it just comes back to this again. There's no perfect answer there, right? There's no answer to how you control that thing. Each person has to look at this and go, I have all these good qualities, and everyone has different good qualities that they want to make up most of the circle with. Mm-hmm. And everyone has different bad qualities that make up their ego, right? And we have to be able to determine on an individual basis how to control those things and which ones of those feelings and emotions cause the turmoil. That's why it's like, thou shalt not kill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do people murder people? Why is anyone ever killed another person for their own self-interest? Mm-hmm. Right? Don't ever that law, thou shalt not kill, do not ever end another person's life because of your own self-interest. Mm-hmm. That's what that means.
You
right?
could probably put that and on any of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah. Don't do these things for your own self-interest. Mm-hmm. Don't act out of love for your own self-interest, mm-hmm. right? If it's going to cause negative things, right?
Yeah.
And don't act out of hate if it's on your own self-interest. Don't act out of negative ways for your own self-interest. Act out of preservation of life. Mm-hmm. That's the only time self-interest should come in, is preservation of life, right? And when it comes to the opposite of that, that's oftentimes why we find life ending short, for the same reason, self-interest, right? It's a fucking mystery you could talk about in circles forever, and never find out the real reason, because I honestly don't think there is one. No, I think it's meant to be continuous growth, and that's the only way that you have continuous growth, right? How would you get a computer to continuously expand its bandwidth and its understanding of the universe? Put in a code in that computer that gives it a problem it can't solve, right? And it will continuously search for a solution. Yeah. That's creating life.
It's an interesting, I guess, growth in human, I wouldn't say intelligence. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm in the middle of a book. Right here, one sec.
Yeah.
How much I've been reading it. Forget the title. Short History of Progress. And at one point he basically talks about how our brains are not that much evolved in size or anything very evident from our ancestors, like 12,000 years ago.
Yeah, there was only there was like the massive brain growth. It grew at like 60. I don't know.
Yeah, but
anyways, it grew at a massive amount. Right?
Yeah, you could basically pull a small child from a campfire back, maybe not really that campfire, back 12,000 years ago when language was barely a thing, and raise them in our society, and they would probably do just fine. Like they would be able to talk and all of these other things, right? That's essentially what came out of that. And so I think in terms of knowledge, or like it's an interesting thing to go down, because we have come so far because we've been able to store this knowledge and to kind of like we stand on the shoulders of giants kind of thing, right?
How do we store the knowledge though? Not with computers. Well, all the knowledge we have today comes from our history.
Until we started storing it on computers, it was a very slow progress.
All we did was take the knowledge that's been stored by our ancestors for thousands of years in sculptures and stories and other stuff, interpret it, and turn it into data. That's all we did.
Well, yeah, but now we're actually at a point where
creating stuff from data.
Well, yeah, computers are now able to I think that kind of growth is kind of exponential, right? It's interesting. So,
well, there's this wide thought, or actually, there's this this idea that I heard the other day, which is that's the inevitable cycle of life, right? Is that whatever we are, whatever humans are, we started because, or alien. Let's say aliens. We're gonna get real fucking crazy here. We're bringing aliens into the picture here and say that. Let's say humans are a product of advanced evolution, right? You come here, you find primates, you fuck with their DNA because you've got the technology, you advance that evolution a little bit, you see, because we already know there was a mass extinction of the human population not that long ago. And they believe there's a couple different theories, like a meteorite strike and stuff like that, but at one point, they believe that the human population was down to like as little as like 500 people on the planet.
Yeah.
Right? And so we had to build back from that and create a civilization. So we lost a lot in that. So the idea of this theory of like its advanced evolution is that there was a culture, there was an advanced civilization, now whether it was already on Earth or whether it came from extraterrestrial, that was able to speed up the evolution of primates to become human, to modern humans at least, right? Which is what you see in that era where the brain just rapidly grew, and now we haven't seen growth in the human brain for thousands of years, or millions of years. I have no idea. You just looked this up, so you should probably know better than me. But you see this growth, and then they say, okay, well, then what are abductions and visitations and all this UFO footage and extraterrestrial shit you see on coming out now? Well, they're saying, okay, well, they're checking up on us. They're seeing, okay, they fucked up and they wiped, this population basically got wiped out. We got to give these guys a hand so they can get going again, right? And get their population rolling again. So they sped it up, and now you see this rapid increase in productivity because of the advancement in technology in the last 100 years. And the natural course of technology is going to be what? Artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is then the next logical step in what? Going and visiting distant planets. Because human life's not capable of it. And then how would we create human life on those planets if there isn't any, but there's animal life? Say we stumble on a planet in the Goldilocks zone where there's animal life, where things have developed. Oh, look, these guys have DNA kind of similar to humans. Yeah. Well, let's fuck with it a little bit using CRISPR and start to create people. Now all we have to do is monitor them and make sure they don't know that we did this, because we're creating more human populations. That's the idea behind that, and it actually seems plausible because of the direction we're going. They're literally planning to go to Mars in the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's like the physical side of simulation theory,
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
I heard the simulation theory for the first time a couple weeks ago.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I've heard
that.
of it, but
Okay.
I didn't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
But I want you to tell me what you think it is, because I want to talk about this actually, because there was a point when I was listening to it and I was thinking, I was like, this really makes sense. But I was like, there was an argument point I had for it, which I think came down to that thing that I was talking about, which is like, what's the purpose?
Yeah.
If that's the theory, what's the purpose?
So I think, and it kind of, I guess that wraps back around to some of the stuff we were talking about. Basically, my understanding of it is, our civilization. Sorry, choke back some water. Sorry. Our civilization advances until it can create its own simulation that is so realistic. Basically, until we can create our own consciousness, like artificially.
And then it starts to build on itself.
And then that, happens. You go into that, and then that, that simulation then builds until it can create its own simulation, and so on and so forth. Right?
I understand that. But okay. So my question for you would be then, what was the start of that? When did it start? Right. What came before the simulation, or has it always been a simulation?
Yeah.
Right. It's like chicken and the egg thing. Right?
Exactly.
Well, what came before the chicken and the egg? Evolution. Right? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Evolution came first.
Yeah.
And it evolved into a chicken, which then started laying eggs. Right? That's what happened.
The Big Bang came before simulation theory.
I think I heard somewhere that they're saying that that's not the theory anymore. That there's the big. Yeah, I think they were. I need to Google this because
I'm curious.
Talking some kinds of shit here.
Yeah.
But I definitely heard somewhere that the Big Bang wasn't the general census anymore. Big Bang theory. We need a Jamie on here.
Yeah.
Big Bang theory not true. I'm just gonna look up Big Bang theory not true. The Big Bang wasn't the beginning after all. Forbes magazine.
Forbes. Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious.
The universe began not with a whimper, but with a bang. At least that's what you're commonly told. The universe and everything in it came into existence as... get out of here, you fucking ads. Space and time and all the matter and energy within began from a singular point and expanded and cooled, giving rise over billions of years to atoms, stars, galaxies, and clusters of galaxies spread out across the billions of light years. Billions of years to the atoms, stars, galaxies, and clusters of galaxies spread out across the billions of light years that make up your observable universe. It's a compelling, beautiful picture that explains so much of what we see, from the present large-scale structure of the universe to trillion galaxies to the leftover glow of radiation permeating all of existence. Unfortunately, it's also wrong, and scientists have known this for almost 40 years.
I wonder if they've known this for 40 years and yet it's now just coming to light that it's the no longer agreed upon theory. Yeah. What's next?
The idea of the Big Bang theory, Big Bang first came about back in the 1920s and 30s when we looked out at a distant galaxies and discovered something peculiar. The further away from us they were, the faster they appeared to be receding from us. According to the predictions of Einstein's general relativity, a static universe would be gravitationally unstable. Everything needed to be either moving away from one another or collapsing toward one another if the fabric of space obeyed his laws. The observation of his apparent recession taught us that the universe was expanding today, and if things are getting farther apart as time goes on, it means they were closer together in the distant past. An expanding universe doesn't mean that things get farther apart as time goes on. It also means that the light existing in the universe stretches in wavelength as we travel forward in time. Since wavelength determines energy, shorter is more energetic. That means the universe cools as we age, and hence things were hotter in the past. Extrapolate this back. That was a big word. Extrapolate this back far enough, and you'll come to a time where everything was hot, so hot that not even neutral atoms could form. If this picture were correct, we should see a leftover glow of radiation stay in all directions that had cooled was freaking on there. That had cooled to just a few degrees above absolute zero. The discovery of this cosmic microwave background in 1964 by Arno Penzias and Bob Wilson was a breathtaking confirmation of the Big Bang. Oh, fuck. This is like a whole article. It's going to make me read it.
Of course.
Okay, the very final point is this singularity that represents where laws of physics break down also is understood to represent the origin of space-time.
Okay, so the reason that the Big Bang Theory is not true, essentially, is because of the proof of quantum physics. Saying that there has to be a causation for this to happen. But quantum physics, essentially, for those people who might watch this and don't understand quantum physics, a really, really easy definition, because I don't understand quantum physics at all either compared to most people, or compared to a lot of people, I guess, is say you have an electron right here in Calgary, and then you have an electron over in Toronto. If you, whatever I do to the electron here, whatever stimulus I give this electron will affect the electron in Toronto. And so what that means is there's a connection between the two of them that's not measured through space, time, and distance, right? So therefore, you get Einstein's theory of, I think it's theory of relativity, which is essentially takes a flat piece of paper, folds it in half to create a wormhole.
Yeah.
Is what the old term used to be, or a black hole, or whatever, that creates that quantum physics, right? So the quantum realm is essentially the space between the physical distance that we have to travel, which, again, is the kind of science that's coming out now that's proving this, right? And there's been a mathematical equation. Eric Weinstein, yeah. Do you know who that is?
I think it rings a bell. I don't know who it is.
He's a theoretical physicist, and he just released a website that explains his theory of this new mathematical equation that they've discovered and proven, and that is that there is a force of some kind that is two intersecting circles, and it's always they're always rotating, they're always moving in the secular motion, which creates spiral and motion, right? And so it's everywhere. It exists in all places, and they've proven this through certain mathematical reactions or something. I don't know how he explains it, but essentially what that was, and from what I've learned on some other stuff in the few days after representing consciousness, is I was like, oh, well, when you draw that out and you see the two intersecting circles, well, if you make those two intersecting circles 360 degrees, you get an orb, right? It's an orb. And when you think of consciousness existing everywhere, that's an orb, right? It's an orb. The Earth exists within consciousness, but we also exist within consciousness within the Earth, right? In our own space. So we each own our own individual consciousness, which is why it gets so confusing.
Yeah.
Because he's like, we can't prove where it is.
We're just orbs.
All we know is that it's everywhere. It's all around us, and it's also just around me. And it's right here, but it's also here, right? There's no size to this thing. It's everywhere. It just is. And so what that proves is that within a three-dimensional realm, this circle exists everywhere, right? And so how do you get to what's on the other side of that orb? Yeah. Well, that would be the fourth dimension, right? That would be the thing we can't see. Science says you have to vibrate at a certain frequency. Your molecules have to vibrate at a certain frequency to be able to transmit that field, right? And if you can't do that, well, then you're not able to see that stuff. You're not able to go through that. And when people die and our energy leaves our body, it's vibrating at a much higher level. Well, if your energy is vibrating at a higher level, guess where it's going to go? Out through there.
Yeah.
Right? If you're vibrating at a lower level when you die, because you've not led a good life, you're a bad person, you're not going to get through that barrier, are you? You're not going to be able to, because you're not vibrating at that level. So what's your energy forced to do? Your energy is forced to find somewhere else to live. Right?
Yeah.
You can tie in all kinds of shit to this, man.
Yeah.
Like, like all the reasons. It's a really cool conversation because you can tie in everything to it. It's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Like science, spirituality, aliens, history, politics, the way people act, everything, right? It's fucking weird.
When we finish this, you should throw the links to some of the articles that you were looking at.
Yeah, well, most of the stuff that I've listened to is in audiobook. So,
well, even just that last article
though. The Forbes article.
Yeah, throw that in.
I'll put that in the comments.
Check it out.
Control C. So,
just you can do it after. It's all good. But yeah, no, it's I enjoy like talking about all of these different theories behind how everything works because again, it makes us goes back to us wanting to understand things, right? So
and it's like the people who it seems like the people who are haunted by these questions are the ones who either have the biggest, provide the most for humanity or do the most damage, right? Depending on how they act on that.
Yeah.
Like you look at a guy like Hitler. I would love to know. Oh God, could you imagine having a conversation with a person that would become Hitler or a Hitler, right? Like what kind of conversation happens there? What does that person say to you in a normal conversation? You know, is that a person you walk up to on the street and you look at that person and you go, oh, there's a normal guy? Or does that person walk up to you and you go, what the shit is happening here?
Yeah.
This guy is on another level, right? And to that point, how does that person become the leader of a country?
I think it's, what is it on Rick and Morty? He creates like the ultimate leader and Aberdolf Linkler or something. It's literally that. It's that person with something so wrong with them, and yet they're a brilliant leader. Like absolutely brilliant. They have to be. That's the only way that you can get in that position.
But
you know what I mean?
I think there has to be a level of corruption on a personal level, on a spiritual.
There's something seriously wrong with anybody that gets to that point ever.
But
even whether they rise to that power, but
I mean, my question is where was the moment?
Yeah.
Where was the moment? Right? There had to have been a moment.
Yeah.
And my whole pursuit in what I do with people is finding that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm so obsessed with these people who were these massive, people in our history. Is what was the moment that made them that person? Because there was a moment, and it was in their childhood. It always is. It always is. There's always a moment.
Do you find you have like the same, obsession with finding that moment in people who have done the opposite?
Yeah. So like,
is that easier to find? I assume.
It's like Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two perfect examples because of the documentaries that came out in the last 2 years. That they were two of the best documentaries we've ever seen.
Yeah.
On these.
I haven't seen Tigers yet. I need to.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, what's amazing about them is they were able to find their gift. Okay, these are two people who found their purpose. Right now, Tiger, you could argue. His dad forced him into a lot of what he did, but I don't think his dad forced him to love golf. I honestly don't. I think Tiger would have loved golf and he would have played golf regardless. And would he have been as good as he was without his dad? I don't think so. But the reason is that because his dad built his ego. His dad built Tiger's ego for him. He programmed him from the time he was a baby. Like, you watch that documentary, he had him in the garage, in a chair, like in a high chair, watching him play golf, hitting golf balls. So as an infant, he's sitting there, whack, whack, whack. This is all he knows from day one.
Is this on
right?
Netflix?
So
Sorry.
Yeah, it's on HBO.
HBO, okay.
So you can get it on Crave.
Yeah.
And so of course he grew up to be the greatest golfer ever. How many people do you know spend their entire lives watching someone swing a golf club and then themselves from the moment, 2 years old, he's hitting golf balls in his garage. Same thing with his dad. He would hit a ball and then he'd give him a bite of a sandwich. He'd hit a ball and then he'd give him a bite of a sandwich. He'd hit a ball and he'd give him a bite of a sandwich. And that's how he did every single day for his whole life growing up. Then he got into the course. And all this... Yes, Adam goes black early again. And so he goes through this his life like this, and he gets trained by his dad since day one. His dad builds his ego up and says, you're born for this. You're going to transcend the game. This is more than golf for you. This is your purpose. You're going to be a person who changes not only the game of golf but the world, and transcends race and gender and all of this stuff to be like a messiah, right? So he built his kid up from day one, but because of Earl Wood's own self-ingrained paradigms that caused him to act on his own ego, he created this small monster in Tiger, which was his relationship with women. Right? Because Tiger used to see his dad give golf lessons to these young women, and then he would take them into his motorhome for cocktails, right? And then he'd go in there and he'd have sex with these girls. And Tiger is 7 years old, he's not at an age where he understands, but he's at an age where he sees and knows what's happening, right? And he understands it's not right. And so this ingrains on his brain, and look at what happens. What is his downfall? Ugly, slutty white chicks. What a fucking shock. The greatest person to play golf ever, and one of the greatest human beings, I think, ever, just in terms of his competitiveness and his raw like fearlessness when it came to the moment, right? And so what brings this guy down? His weakness for ugly, trailer, trashy white chicks. Why? Because that was the one thing that was ingrained in his brain as a kid from his father that took him down.
My question,
and that's why he fell back.
Yeah, my question though, not what was the moment that brought them down.
What made him great?
Yeah, that's where I was going with that.
Meditating, his mindset.
What was the moment though?
So that's the thing about good. Good is not a moment. And that's why it only takes one thing bad to ruin a lot of good things. Because good is not a moment. Good happens over an expanse of time. Things build up to create a great or good thing.
Good is a practice.
Exactly. It's about pursuing greatness. Negativity is a point. Negativity is stopping. Okay? Picture this. All right? If everyone's driving on the highway, right, and everyone's going the same speed, when I'm in my car and I look over at you, it looks like we're standing still. It looks like we're standing still right now. Yeah. We're actually flying through space super fast, but just because we're going the same speed, I can see you and you can see me, and everything looks still. Well, if one of us were to suddenly stop, my world would become chaos. The earth would everything would explode, right? Well, that's what happens. If we stop moving through this flow of life, stop pursuing good things, or start pursuing negative things, or pursuing things in the past, well, we go against traffic, or we stop in traffic, and we get hit by other cars, and we take out people along the way, and we bring other people with us, and we create bigger problems when we do that. But if we pursue this forward goal, and all go in the same direction, and pursue this good and greatness, instead of pursuing and holding on to past things that were good, or might have worked back then, instead of moving forward, we stop that from happening. So if you want to stop that, you just have to keep the flow going. The people that stop the flow are the ones who cause the negativity. Stopping is negative. Progress, moving forward, is positive. Unless we all together as a whole stop, which is impossible and probably not going to work out the best for some reason. And I can't see that happening at any point. It wouldn't happen, right? You never see that unless there's an accident, unless Kobe Bryant dies, and the world stops, literally. Nobody goes to work, nobody talks, right? Why? Because we lost someone who did what we're all trying to do. He found his purpose in basketball.
Yeah.
He found his purpose in his wife. He found his purpose for love in his wife, right? And his family. And then he, sorry, Cordell keeps calling me. He found his purpose in his wife and family and basketball. And then as soon as he completed that purpose, and he went against his trials, right? We all know what happened, like with the rape allegations and stuff. And I don't know the details of that because I think I was too young at the time when it was happening to like know about the details of it. But he went through that and came out of it on the other side and was able to focus and maintain his attention on the goal, on his family, and on basketball. And what are the odds that the year after he retires and completes his purpose in life of inspiring millions of people, that he ends up dying in a freak fucking accident that was literally as close to an act of God as you can put on a death certificate, is a pilot error because an experienced pilot who's flying through fog who somehow doesn't realize, and none of them realize, that they're flying downwards because they were flying down at such an angle that they didn't know. And they all died in a way that they had no idea. They had no idea they were going to die. They didn't even know what happened because it happened so quickly. That there wouldn't have been any fear for any of them. Right? So if you're a person and you want to look at this in like a spiritual way, if you're a person and you complete your purpose in life, and we all know Kobe's relationship with Gigi was like, that was everything to him, those two, right? How could that energy exist without the other? Right? That's the feeling you had with them, which is why there was this almost, it sounds kind of sick to say, but it was almost like a happiness that he got to leave with his daughter. It sucks that she was so young and she died, and she had so much potential, and that's such a tragedy for I think the world lost someone great there in Kobe's kids, right? But if you look at it from that angle, it's like, how could those energies have existed without each other if you know enough about them? It makes perfect sense that they would have left this place together, right? So it just, all of it, even the saddest things make sense when you look at them from the right perspective. And the only perspective that makes something like as sad as that make sense is one of, again, God, higher power, consciousness, whatever.
And I think that's kind of where, going back to why science and spirituality have such a difficult time coming together, is science needs proof of everything, and spirituality is kind of accepting in the reasoning behind it, whether that this reason or this reason is not the most accurate or whatever it is. It's kind of, I think that's why they kind of clash as much as they do. So where mindfulness and consciousness is actually being able to be defined, and like we're starting to be able to measure it through some of the tools we have now. It's kind of cool because it kind of brings it together.
So what if I'll propose this question to you then. What if we have it almost figured out, right? What if the scientific method is so close to figuring out the right way to do things, but it's just missing something that incorporates that faith factor? And it's maybe just set up in a way that doesn't allow that faith factor in, right? Which is, you're looking at, with the scientific method, and you probably know this better because I remember you being much better at science in school than I was you have your, actually I want you to do you know the scientific method, like the actual?
Well, it's essentially just the whole concept of, come up with a theory, prove it, disprove it, until...
And it has to be repeatable.
It has to be repeatable. That's
so why has no one been able to prove the theory of consciousness and our ability to interact with it yet, right?
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate question: is
So-
why through science can we prove that?
I think,
And
I'd say kind of answer that. I'll maybe not answer it within sort of another question, but maybe a possibility. So the same way that science was the next best way to explain things from spirituality, from the previous way, religion, from the ways that we explained things before. What if the next thing that happens is with science we are finally able to prove these things, and all of a sudden,
like, there's no causation.
well, all of a sudden the scientific method is now the former best way to explain things, and we have a new method. Wouldn't that be cool? I think that'd be kind of
and
sweet
well,
thing.
that's what I'm thinking, right? If the whole concept of science is evolution, well, then they should probably practice what they preach, which is show some evolution in your scientific process, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there has been, like, that we're just unaware of.
Yeah.
But in a lot of different scientific processes, there's been evolution.
Mm.
But I think in the scientific process of, like, the scientific thought process, I think is where the problem lies, right? And that is that unless there is a physical piece of evidence that causes an energetic, causation and correlation, right?
Yeah.
And a physical correlation, then it's unprovable. Well, if I said, all right, let's prove the law of receiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is that provable through science? It's not. But yet it's a law.
Not yet.
Exactly. So, is it provable through quantum physics? Maybe, right? But if you go, all right, I want to prove the law of receiving, I'm going to give money to someone who's open to receiving because I'm so familiar with this law, I know how to use it. I'm going to give money to someone who's open to receiving it, and therefore I'm going to open myself up to receiving, and therefore I'm going to receive money in return. Now, why can't I document that and say, on this date, I gave this source this amount of money here, and then at some point I received money right after I did that, right?
Yeah.
In X amount of money at this time, right? And then you go, okay, so how can you prove that caused that? Well, the reason you can't is because there's always a cause for that money to have been there, right? There's always a reason. Well, that money didn't come from the homeless guy you gave money to.
Yeah.
That's what science would have proved, right? Scientific theory is you gave money to that homeless guy. That money then, the result then has to come from that homeless person. Well, if the result comes from somewhere else, science can't prove how those two things correlate.
I think the reason
that's where the scientific theory falls apart.
To break it down to I guess further is there are
1 + 1 = 11.
there are
right?
so
Instead of
many.
two.
There are way too many factors involved, way too many variables involved to ever come up with.
Yes.
Right? That's essentially it. Like, maybe it is provable, but not with our current technology. The amount of data you would need to prove that, I don't think.
But it has to be provable. It has to be provable because it's teachable. If it's teachable, then it's provable, right? So if what I'm teaching people is true, and what you're doing with your life right now, because it might not be directly because of what I taught you, but you might be accelerating what you're doing in life because of the knowledge that I taught you through the course, right? You're now using that knowledge of how these laws work, of how the laws of the universe work, to motivate, to move, to give you direction with what you're pursuing, to give you direction in that pursuit, right? And to apply action steps that cause indirectly good results. Mm-hmm. So you are using that power and that knowledge of how to manipulate that, but you still can't explain it. And I don't think we'll ever be able to, because there's nothing physically being manipulated that causes a physical reaction for the things we receive.
I think going back to the data, at some point if you actually have enough data, which again I don't think we're probably 100 years away from being able to find having a computer that can compute that fast and that much data, like of all of these variables in whatever simulation there might be.
I don't think so. Quantum computers.
You don't. Well, not, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, they are.
You think?
Sorry, this is a conversation I heard the other day too.
Okay. So either way,
go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't think we haven't had a computer that has done that yet.
Not yet. Yes.
So, and I do like I understand that quantum computers are like just exponentially greater than what we have. But anyways, we don't have anything that has been able to do that because there's so much data, because there are so many variables, there's so much data.
So do you know how quantum computing works? Like the theory behind quantum computing?
I looked it up like briefly years ago. I couldn't tell you if I tried.
So quantum computing is, I don't know how they build these things or how they operate them, but the concept I understand is that the code you're building, the problem you're trying to solve in quantum computing, it would be essentially, the theory is that if you're trying to solve that problem in this universe, in this realm that we're living in, right, that there is, every single time we make a decision or there's a possibility of something, there's a universe that exists in which that possibilities happen, right? So there's infinite universes with infinite possibilities, infinite timelines, infinite use, right? And infinite means doing different things. And so within that, quantum computing is being able to communicate a computer coding in one realm, solving a problem, and also solving that same problem in a different realm. So the computing and the problem solving expands, like you said, exponentially.
Yeah.
Because it's happening in countless realms at countless times, which means that data is being processed countless amounts of times faster, which means that data might be able to understand things and speed up evolution and speed up the process until it figures out, if it fast forwarded what Earth is or what the universe cycle is, it could find out what consciousness is.
I think to expand on that, from what I do remember, so computers now are ones and zeros. It's all binary. Like everything's binary, which is insane. I started taking
That's weird, hey?
Yeah.
It's kind of like good and bad.
Well, no, not even.
Right and wrong, true and false.
Just is or
yes
isn't.
And no.
Is or isn't. That's literally it. No right or wrong. Yeah. Just is or isn't.
That's a great point, because right or wrong is objective.
It is, right? It just is or isn't. That's literally it. So, but it's is or isn't, and there's like, that's how the data is. And it's just kind of linear almost, whereas quantum, like on a physical level, you have
it's layered.
It's not even is or isn't, but it's all connected. So that's kind of, from what I remember, that's how I understand it. So it's not, you don't just have is or isn't, it's is or isn't, or is or isn't, or is or, and it may not, I don't even think it's binary. It's there's another level to it. So it's
in this I keep saying realm because I don't have another word for it, but in this realm it is, and then in this realm it isn't, right? In that same line of code, right? That one is a one there, but in this realm it's a zero. So that changes the whole thing. And so there's infinite possibilities about that, depending on which one of those ones, which one of those zeros you change. It changes something. It's like the butterfly effect. It's the whole thing. Yeah, so that's quantum computing, but that's.
I actually understand
a whole concept
from what I understood of quantum computing. I took when I was in Germany earlier this year. I started taking a coding course, like basic coding. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I just want to pay somebody else to do this. So but I did learn like how bytes work, and it was really cool. It was really crazy actually. But anyways, after learning that, and now that you're bringing it up, it's coming together, and it's like, wow, that makes so much more sense. I actually understand that, so it's cool.
See, and I'm a visual learner. Yeah, if you sat me down and showed me the mathematics behind all of this stuff, or or show me
some basic language
how to actually code stuff, Yeah, I wouldn't know the first thing about it.
Oh,
But if you explain it to me, I can visualize things, and once I visualize it, I understand how it works.
Yeah.
That's how I learned. That's how I learned to do stuff. So when if I watch someone do something, and then I ask them if I have a question about a function of that action they're taking, that's how I learn, right? But I can't learn from reading something. I can't learn from numbers and stuff like that. I have to be shown, and then I can do it.
Would you say it's you can learn from reading something, but you can't understand unless you.
I don't retain information from reading.
Okay.
I can retain information, and maybe that's my learning disabilities, but I retain information from listening. But even when I'm listening, I'm constantly doing something else. So I have headphones in, and I'll be writing stuff about something completely different than what I'm listening to, but I'm listening to that thing. So it's like I have, in order to listen to something like that or understand, not visually and fully applying myself to it physically, then I have to be distracted physically so that mentally I can pay attention to that thing.
Yeah, that makes
sense. Right?
sense.
It's kind of a challenge, which is why I pretty much averaged about 75% through my high school career.
It's okay.
But I think that's these are all really interesting points, and I think in the future, I'd like to get some people on here that
actually know what they're talking about.
Well, know what they're fucking talking about, and aren't just a couple guys that are like, oh, this is crazy, what is this, what is that, right?
Once. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, most of the stuff that I learn is just self-taught through my interests and hobbies, and I have weird interests and hobbies, right? It's stuff like that, but I don't know a lot of people who...
We're the exact same in that way. We have these interests and we actually pursue them, so we know enough about them to sound like maybe we know, and yet it's probably the Dunning-Kruger
effect. I know more than the average person about certain things.
Well, it's probably the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we feel like we know enough. The less we know, the less we know, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You remember that?
It's the
but anyways,
you don't know what you don't know.
So it's kind of crazy. Yeah. The less the less you know, the more you think you know. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
The less you know.
Actually, you know why I did so poorly? No, I shouldn't say so poorly. I took a full year university psychology intro, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite courses.
I should have done that.
And I liked it. It was so cool. I've got a textbook if you want one. You can check it out. It's pretty
I don't
cool.
read. We just talked about this.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Anyways, and I liked it. Was again one of my favorite courses. But when it came to actually taking the tests and stuff, because I wasn't word for word on a lot of the stuff, I understood everything. I would only get half a mark on everything, and it bugged me. But whatever, I'm not gonna be a psychologist. It's cool to understand this stuff though. But anyways, we should wrap this up.
Yeah, man. 2 hours is good for me.
Yeah, I also got to take a piss. I've been pounding this water, so.
Well, and you have to drive home.
Yeah,
Sunday from old still, so.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go smoke a bowl and watch TV.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Anyways.
All right, man. Okay, good chat. Yeah, I'm excited for next week, and I'm gonna find a guest for next week too, so we can bring somebody on.
See if Cordell wants to join in. He was excited about it. So cool.
Will do. I gotta call him. He's been panicking calling me. So
yeah, probably get back.
All right. Okay. Have a good one.
Cheers.